MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com. Expand your skills, improve yourself. Get a free 10-day trial of all lynda.com has to offer at lynda.com/MacVoices. And by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we get this time to talk to a Take Control author about a book that we talked about before, but it was one of those preview versions of the book, an early edition that came out before the product. Now it's a fully blown Take Control crash course, and it's one that you should be paying attention to, even if you haven't bought the product. Mr. Jeff Carlson is here to talk about Apple Watch, a Take Control crash course. Jeff, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's always a pleasure. I still quite haven't gotten the nomenclature down on the crash courses yet, but I'm working on it.
I know. And it seems like these days, maybe it's because of, having to do good SEO, like all book titles are now really long. It's, Apple Watch, a Take Control crash course, or,
Yeah, the sequel,
Yeah. That's explaining exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, no. I was trying to do something with Terminator 3 or Genesis wasn't working. No, Jeff, I was anxious to have you back on to talk about the Apple Watch book for lots of reasons. There are plenty of watch owners out there. We're getting more all the time, and we'll talk about some of that a little bit later. But when we first talked, you were trying to write the framework of the Take Control a Take Control crash course for Apple Watch before having an Apple Watch in your hand, which is really, it was an interesting challenge because you'd never even seen one of these things before, let alone had a chance to work with it. So I want to just find out how you went about sort of backfilling in, how many changes got made from the way you thought you were going to cover it to what you ended up covering, and what surprises you had or revelations that you had as you explored the Apple Watch for real.
Yeah, well, just as a quick recap, what we did, which I think is a little unusual, we put out a book before the watch shipped that was basically, here's what we know now, and here's what can help you, decide if you want to buy a watch, and sort of, be prepared. It was also a way to, offer the book at a smaller price, so people who advance ordered would get the update for free. And of course, I didn't have a watch. I can't even say I used a watch. I was there when that watch was introduced last year, and I was able to get a little bit of hands-on time with the watch at the Apple event. But even then, the Apple employees who had them, they're the ones who did the demo, who showed off the features. Like, they wouldn't let journalists actually even, tap or touch or scroll or whatever. And so the challenge was, how can we, make a crash course book that would have a lot of good information and be sort of a stub for something to come. And I think we did a really good job. And as you mentioned, I was quite surprised at how much changed between September and April when the watch actually shipped, both in terms of what I had to do to fill out the full version of the book, and also just things that Apple had promised that just never arrived or got pushed out or something like that. So, like one example off the top of my head, they were very excited about showing off the feature to have as your watch face a photo of your own choosing. Or they also had a few watch faces that were like time-lapse movies. So you'd look at your wrist, you'd see the sunset over in England. And those just didn't show up. It turns out that I think Apple was probably being more conscientious about battery usage, with the first round. And so those two faces are now coming out with watchOS 2, which I think it will probably be this fall. I think they're asking for. So it was a lot of those little things going through the book and realizing that, they mentioned a walkie-talkie feature. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. It's probably still on the drawing boards, but it's not something that is in the shipping version. So little details like that, but mostly it was just, okay, now that I have this, now we saw the demos, we saw the keynote, all of the commercials, and especially doing that first edition of the book when I was scouring every word on the website and watching the keynote video over and over again, getting details. Then to say, okay, now that we've got it, like we know what the features are, we know what the big standout things are. How is it in actual use? Like, how important is it to set up your notifications? Well, it turns out, at least for me, and I think a lot of other people, notifications are one of the main reasons for having an Apple Watch. And you can either go crazy, or you can do things that will determine what actually gets to the watch to notify you, to help you deal with the possible overload of things. So, a lot of things like that I think in general, a lot of Apple Watch owners have realized, like, here was this great ability to, play music or control music on my iPhone using my watch, and some people are like, well, actually the phone's not that far away. I don't need to go to the watch and go to the apps and launch the music thing and, or do the glances or whatever. So I think in that sense, there was also that very interesting difference between what you expect you're going to do with something and then what you end up doing with it. And and then just writing all about that, because the crash course isn't just here's what it does and here are the features. It's also a lot of, well, here's what I do and here's what I recommend, and that kind of person next to you guiding you through it type of approach.
That's one reason I think it's so valuable. Because you're right, the first version of the book, and by the way, in case people think that you were trying to foist off something on them that wasn't accurate, the people that bought the early version got the next version for free. So that's just the take control way. But yeah, I think we've all gone through this learning curve. This was a brand new device, and out short of the keynote. And people like yourself that did exhaustive research on every single thing they could find, I think we all had some expectations, but we didn't have necessarily accurate expectations of how we were going to use this. I know I've had my own set of surprises in using it. They've all been positive. So I can say there it is.
Look,
the salute, I've been a very happy Apple Watch user. But I think you're right. I think that there's this terrible temptation to say, oh, yeah, I'd love to be notified every time a tweet comes through, every time a Facebook notification comes through, every time an email comes through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you quickly learn that's not the case.
Yeah, exactly. And it has a really interesting way of helping you prioritize a lot of that stuff that maybe on the phone you didn't really care so much that you had a big screen of notifications, because when you would look at it, you sort of scroll through them and maybe pay attention to some, maybe respond to some, whatever. But when it's something that's actually literally tapping you on your wrist for your attention, that becomes a good motivation to figure out what's really important to get through. And I think as a result, I don't want to I don't want to like fall into that. The Apple Watch has improved my life so much and it's changed the way I look at the world. Which I think can be kind of tempting to do, because I say that in the sense that it sort of does change your behavior a little bit in a positive way, at least, speaking for myself, that oh, you know what? A lot of the stuff that I was getting a notification for, and that I was either ignoring, or maybe I wasn't ignoring, but I should have been ignoring. Like I don't need that stuff. Like for example, one thing that pops to mind. I really don't need to be notified when one of my friends contributes to a Kickstarter campaign every time. Especially since, like, I think I already get an email about it. So, that's fine. There's nothing that says, oh, I have to go check this out right now because I only have 30 days before the Kickstarter ends,
Yeah.
And so, that being able to filter things using the watch has been beneficial, not just because of what I'm doing, with the watch itself, but also just sort of like how the data gets to me. I would say another example, I think we all sort of wondered, like, all right, now that we have another screen on our wrist, are we going to spend all of our time doing this? And I really don't. The fact that Apple named the feature glances, where you swipe up to get little bits of information, for me, glances are just using the watch. Something pops up, I look at it really quick. Usually I just dismiss it, and that's that. And that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to demand my attention, which is kind of a really novel thing. About the watch in general, and just like technology in general, because we expect that attention demand, and we use an iPhone, and it sucks our attention away. And these are all things that I know you've covered and other people have covered, but it's interesting in the context of writing a book about it. How to express that idea of here's something you can do. Here's something that you'll probably, here's what you more likely will do, I guess.
Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a full, free 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. I've been telling you about lynda.com now for some time, about the breadth of their topics, from graphics design to business, photography to website building, and much, much more. About the depth of their training that takes you from the starting line to a deep dive in topics like iOS development and video production. More than a few people have used lynda.com to change their careers. Even more have changed their lives by adding or improving skills they needed for their work or just for themselves. That's one of the great parts about learning with lynda.com. You decide what you want to learn. Another great thing is that you get to decide how you want to learn. Watch any of lynda.com's video courses at the pace you want. Watch them once. Watch them multiple times. Watch them in order. Watch them out of order, or just jump to the parts that you need. Watch them on your Mac, or on your iPhone, or on your iPad. Watch them streaming online, or use the lynda.com iOS app to download and watch them offline. Watch them when you want, where you want, how you want. I've been adding new courses to my lynda.com queue that I want to check out. That includes not just existing courses like Up and Running with Photos for OS X, but new courses like SEO Tools Fundamentals, Squarespace 7 Essential Training, and the new iPad Tips and Tricks, because you can never have enough iPad tips and tricks. If you are in the corporate world, or if you're a Microsoft Office fan, a couple other new courses you might be interested in include Office for Mac 2016 New Features, and Up and Running with Office for iOS devices. Those are just a few of the over 3,600 video courses available on lynda.com. Yes, I said 3,600. So there's certainly going to be a whole lot of material that you're going to be interested in and that is going to benefit you for work or for your personal goals and satisfaction. Best of all, you can try lynda.com right now for a free, full 10 days by signing up at lynda.com/MacVoices. During those 10 days, you can watch any of the 3,600 courses. Any of them. The legacy material on long-standing favorite programs and subjects, any of them. And as many of them as you can watch in 10 days, absolutely free when you sign up at lynda.com/MacVoices. Do yourself a favor and sign up for your free lynda.com trial membership right now, and do me a favor by signing up at lynda.com/MacVoices. It lets lynda.com know that you heard it here and that MacVoices listeners appreciate the very best in video training. That's lynda.com/MacVoices for 10 free days of unlimited video training to help you learn something new. Thanks to lynda.com for supporting MacVoices. You use the word filter, and it's something that I didn't see coming. I didn't expect to be needing to be filter my information, because I pull my phone out of my pocket and okay, so I've got 7 emails and 5 or 6 tweets and a Facebook notification and different things. And maybe it's the larger screen. Maybe it's the fact that when I take my iPhone and hold it up, that I'm expecting to give it full attention. But when the watch taps me, I would give it a second's worth of attention to see what it wants, but that's about it. And if it's something I really need to act on, great. But it makes you rethink all this information that we have coming in. I mean, everybody has talked about the flood of information overload. This is one more way to sort of take control of it. Take control.
Good.
See what I did? To take control of it and recognize what really should be a priority when. I don't want this to degenerate into a discussion of favorite apps, but an example for me is the Dark Sky app, where I find it extremely useful to be told about 15 minutes or so before it happens that it's going to start to rain or something worse. And, and it's amazing just how useful that is, but it's not like, okay, otherwise I'd be pulling out the phone to see, did I get a notification yet? Did I get a notification yet? It taps me, it says, hey, rain's starting soon. And so, okay, I've got that piece of information. If my windows are down in the parking lot, I got to go to the parking lot. If not, I just ignore it. But the idea that I'm in noisy environments, but I know I'm getting a phone call because my watch is tapping me. And a lot of times, as a guy, you put your phone in your pocket, you can't always feel it vibrate.
Right.
So there's so many different little things that now I find invaluable. And you're right. I'm not about to say that it's changed my life, even though it has in so many little ways. And they all mount up to something that, I don't want to give this up. I think Andy Anako is the one that always says, the test is, if you left the house in the morning, would you go back for it? My answer is absolutely, because I come to depend on it. Yeah.
I think also, just touching back on what you said about filters, I think when we look at our phones, like, we're already filtering. You're already, looking sort of at a bunch of things, whether they're notifications or emails. You're looking at those things and applying a filter just by scanning them, because you're seeing them in a group. Well, now with the Apple Watch, when you have something that's coming at you one thing at a time, that makes a big difference. And so, because the individual thing is going to demand a little more of your attention, because it's like, okay, here's something, now evaluate it. If you are doing that on your iPhone screen, you're like, oh, here's a whole bunch of things that I have to evaluate. You're already doing that filtering with your mind, and it's easier to get sort of distracted or kind of, well, for me, I can get sort of fuzzy-headed because, I've got this email to deal with, and I've got this text from somebody else, and I've got this notification, and that reminds me that I forgot to do this and that and this and that. And it just sort of goes into a chain of, oh, shoot, I've forgotten all these things, and now I got to backtrack, etc. With the watch, I don't have any emails that come to the watch, email notifications, except for the people that I have marked as VIPs in the mail app. And that way I know that, I don't need to check my mail. I don't need my phone to be, binging me every time something comes in. But if I get an email from Adam or Tanya, for example, it's probably going to be important, and so I can scan it real quick. And it might just be, Tanya saying, hey, do you have the latest draft for me? Or it could be, hey, we have an idea for a new book, or something like that maybe I do want to respond to quickly. So it makes a big difference because you're doing things in a one-off attention thing, but you're using a smaller slice of your attention rather than a larger piece of attention that you then filter. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know what that was, but I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, I'm sitting here right now. My phone is just off camera in a little stand, and I see it flash on every so often, and I know emails are coming through. But I also know that if I get a really important email, my watch is going to buzz because I've done the same thing. And so, all right, great. Those are just, they could be just junk, or they could be people that I want to hear from, but they're not critical enough for me to interrupt this. So it is a different way of looking at filters and of thinking of how you filter information than maybe we've used in the past. Jeff, one of the things that I think is brilliant on Apple's part, but it also creates a false set of expectations. We have the iPhone, and people tend to think of it as a phone, and yet it's so much more. Now we have the Apple Watch, because I don't know what else you would call it, but It's so much more than a watch. And so I think when people look at it, say, gee, that's a lot of money, and am I really going to use all this other stuff? And you really need to think about it differently as far as what it is and what it can do. It's not just a watch. How did you take that approach or think about that approach at all in the book?
I did, definitely, because it's the thing that I hear from most people when they're like, oh, like I don't need an Apple Watch because I've got something on my wrist that tells time just fine, or I can look at my phone and see what time it is. It's not that big of a deal, and you're like, yeah, you're right. That's true. And, actually, as opposed to the iPhone that I rarely ever use as a phone, I actually do use the Apple Watch as a watch because, it's handy to know what time it is. But there are also things that I use it for more often that are also, small and quick, but very useful, such as, my watch face shows the current temperature. It's nice to know, do I need a jacket? Actually, it's been really warm in Seattle, so it's, do I need to take a jacket with me? Do I need to, I've been in my nice cool house. Do I even need 2 shirts? Et cetera. At least one. I will spare everybody. Yes. There'll be at least 1 shirt. So that I think the activity tracking is a big deal that people sort of skim over because they think, oh, well, I'm not an athlete, or I don't, work out, or whatever. I fall into that camp, and yet, I'm not trying to close all my circles and make sure I get all the exercise that I'm supposed to. I probably should. I don't. But you know what? I do make a point of making sure that the little stand circle is being accomplished, is getting closed, because I know that I spend a lot of time sitting and working in front of a computer, and for years and years I have told myself, you got to get up, you got to stretch, you got to do whatever. But having a little something that says, hey, go do that right now. It actually helps. It makes me feel better. And so, like those sorts of little things were sort of surprises in that here's a device. Yes, it's a watch. Yes, it does other things. Yes, you could get a Fitbit. You can do, all sorts of different possibilities to do the same thing. Yes, your phone has a lot of that, capabilities too. But here's something that does it all, and it does it unobtrusively. And there have also been things that I've been completely surprised that I didn't anticipate. Like, for example, using the watch as a phone. And I'm almost embarrassed to say this, because I've actually used the watch as a phone fairly often. And like, I actually am getting embarrassed thinking about this because like I've done it a couple of times in public, which is weird. So I tend not to do that, although it would not surprise me if, 3 years from now, you see people talking on their phones like this. Or, they'll have a Bluetooth headset, something like that. Because if you remember, 5-6 years ago, we'd be all like, oh, well, you'd never walk down the street and talk on the phone. Like, that's just rude. You see it all the time now. Yeah. But when I'm, in my home office and I get a phone call and my phone is either, in my pants pocket or, on the desk somewhere, it's really easy to just, two things. One, it's really easy to accept a call and just talk on the watch because it's basically just a speakerphone then. And so I do that fairly often, largely because I don't have like long phone calls. I don't have, hour-long phone calls. It's usually, my wife calling to ask me something or, me checking in with somebody. And so, when I'm at home, of course, I'll take a call on my watch like that. But even more useful I've found is the fact that from the watch, you can decline incoming calls. And that might sound like a dumb little feature, but I'm sure that I'm not alone in that I get, calls from, telemarketers and numbers that I don't recognize. And so, my general attitude toward phone calls is if I don't know who it is, I just don't answer. Every once in a while that bites me, maybe it's like my publisher calling from a different internal number on their network or, something like that. And then they leave a message, and you can listen to the message on the phone and call them right back. You can listen to the message on the watch, call them right back. But just to be able to, have my phone ring wherever it may be, my watch starts tapping me. I look down, I see that it's not a number that I recognize, and I just tap the decline button, and it's so much easier than pulling out the phone and doing all that. It's even easier when, I'm working in my office and a phone call comes in and I have 2 computers, an iPhone, an iPad, and a watch that all light up because for some reason I still haven't turned off the option to have incoming phone calls ring everywhere. To just be able to go, oh, you know what? I don't know who that is. I'm going to tap that, and it just goes away, and I can keep doing more, work, whatever I'm doing. So that's an example of something that I did not anticipate even thinking about using because I thought, making calls on your wrist would be really kind of a novelty. On the other hand, jump in if I'm just rambling on too long. But
no. It's interesting to hear you talk about that because the first time, this is a little strange. It's going to sound strange, but it's the way it is. I hadn't used the watch as a phone. I was underneath a queen size bed because there had been a problem with the frame. And so I'm underneath the bed. And when you crawl underneath the bed, you take your phone out of your pocket because you don't want to crack it.
Right.
And the phone rings when I'm under there. It's like, great, and it was somebody I needed to talk to. Yeah. And so I'm under the bed and it's like, well, I'll try it, see how it sounds.
Yeah. Sure.
Took the call. They never knew anything different. And in fact, later then I started experimenting with it, and people on the other end would say, "You sound great." No, what's different about it? And it's like, well, I'm calling you from my watch, and they freak out. So it's again, it's one of those things. No, I didn't think I would ever use it, and I do find myself using it. And I'm sure there are going to be people that say, "Wow, Jeff, you really need to get with the activity thing if it's too much trouble to take your phone out of your pocket." Mm-hmm. But there is that convenience thing. There is the ability to deal with a piece of incoming information that's interrupting or demanding your attention just that much easier so that you can continue with what you were doing and then do it later if necessary, or allow it to rightly interrupt you and deal with it then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Are there things? Forgive me for becoming the interviewer. Are there things that you found that you do or don't use that you thought you probably would? I mean, like phone stuff.
Phone stuff, I expected to. I've said this on the show before. Yeah, because of Adam Engst and Jason Snell, I was wearing a Pebble for about a year before the Apple Watch came out. So I had gotten used to getting information on my wrist, and found out how valuable that could be. And the Apple Watch just took it to the next level, because now I could, instead of just getting phone notifications or text or whatever, I had all kind of glances that I could install. And I was one of those people who said, sure, just import everything and turn everything on. Realized the lack of intelligence on that one, and, because your wrist is just constantly but at the same time, that it was good, because it taught me that the lessons we're talking about here now, that we're trying to impart to people, that no, you don't want all your glances on. It's actually better probably to turn everything off, load your watch, and then turn on the ones you think. On the other hand, maybe there is something to be said for that learning process, that it was a little more painful, but I looked at all these things and decided, okay, I want this, I don't want that, I want this, I don't want that. Yeah. So I don't know what the right answer is, but it's been fun to explore and fun to come to understand, again, what we're trying to talk about, that it's called an Apple Watch, but it's an Apple device on your wrist that gives you information.
Yeah.
But that's never going to fit on the box.
Yeah. And there are even things that are, it's interesting that it's really a device of convenience. And, I can see how some people are like, well, it's not that much harder. Like, for example, it's not that much harder to set a timer on your phone, but it's a little bit easier to do it on your watch. And when the timer goes off, you're going to hear it and feel it. It's not going to be, your watch, maybe vibrating on a desk somewhere else. Something like that, like that's something that I use quite often, especially like when I'm cooking, or, if, I tell my daughter she's got 15 more minutes of screen time, then I can set that and know that it's been 15 minutes if I'm reading or doing something where I wouldn't necessarily pay attention to the time. It's things like what else was I had just in mind? Oh, like using maps. It's nice to have. Be able to view maps and get directions on there. I wouldn't say I do it a lot, but there've definitely been times when it's like, I need to find something, and I can, if I'm in the car, I can just, do this and say, hey Siri. Oh, sorry.
Oops.
Sorry, Siri.
Yes. Sorry, folks.
Yeah. Activate that. Say, take me to Agan's house, and it will, just give me those directions. I don't have to do the whole search, and I can keep going. I can keep driving. I think I've got the tapping sequence down for left and right, which surprisingly is complicated. You'd think it'd be like, one tap for left, two taps for right, and it's like this, sequence of 5 or 6 different pulses and dashes. But like that is just nice and convenient. And so, when somebody says, oh, I don't need all of that, and I have to say, that's right, you don't need all of it, but you'll probably find that it's really handy and it's really useful once you have it. I don't go too much into the book about all the different styles and gold and all of that, just because that's all, it's covered just so people who may not be as familiar with what's available will know what's out there. But I think it is kind of interesting that that Apple pushed so hard to make this a lifestyle, almost status item, but not to the degree that, I bought an aluminum sport model. I would have liked to get a steel Apple Watch model, but I don't need it. I don't need the gold model. But if somebody else has it, like it's not that big of a deal. I'm not seeing what's my point? My point is that the way Apple positioned all of it was such that, yes, here's this gold. It's beautiful. Here's how we made it. We engineered our own ore. Johnny Ive probably just went crazy, with all the possibilities of what they could do and the manufacturing, like that stuff's really cool. And if it's not for you, great, because this thing will still do cool stuff no matter which level you choose.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. I'm happy to welcome TunnelBear as a sponsor of Mac Voices. TunnelBear is a simple, attractive app that addresses one of those issues we all face as denizens of the 21st century: web surfing security. TunnelBear is an easy-to-use VPN with over 5 million users. What makes TunnelBear so great is that it's simple. With just a click to turn it on and turn it off, you can browse the internet in complete privacy, get around censorship, and unblock websites. So what's a VPN, I hear you ask? That's geek speak for a virtual private network. What it means is that what you send and what you receive is encrypted, so it can't be seen by governments, ISPs, or anyone else, especially the bad guys. Most VPNs can be a challenge to set up and maintain. I've seen tutorials out there for the roll your own VPNs that promise in 14 steps your VPN might work. Right, 14 steps. With TunnelBear, you just install, click, and you're protected on public Wi-Fi or while traveling. And TunnelBear has apps for your Mac, your iPhone, your iPad, and even a Chrome browser extension. So one solution addresses all your web surfing privacy concerns. TunnelBear is affordable too, with a free option to get you started, and several tiers that will address how much secure web surfing you need. And in today's world, you need a lot. Find out just how easy web surfing security can be by visiting tunnelbear.com/MacVoices and downloading your very own TunnelBear right now. You'll be amazed at how simple and easy security can be. That's tunnelbear.com/MacVoices to try TunnelBear free and make your web surfing more secure. Welcome, and thanks to TunnelBear as a sponsor of Mac Voices. We're a little bit off topic, but we're on the Apple Watch, so we'll go with it.
Yeah.
But I think they were brilliant in not trying to differentiate the different models of Apple Watch through function.
Yeah.
Like they sort of did with some of the iPhone models, where, okay, you get this model, you get a better camera, and this model you get, faster processor or whatever. It's just, okay, the functionality is all the same. It is the cosmetics that are going to make the difference. We've made it, one, very affordable. Well, relatively speaking, really affordable. We've made one that if you're serious about this and you're serious about a watch, you want that. And if you're really rolling in dough and it means that much to you, sure, you can go and get it. But so that was a brilliant move, and I'm with you. I bought the sport model because I couldn't. I like the stainless steel model. I like the look of it better, but I couldn't justify that, given that we'll probably have version 2 or 3 coming out, eventually. So I will want those improvements. I want to test them out. So for right now, let's find out what this device does, and then maybe I'll be more interested in investing a little more in a watch that looks a little nicer and has the same functions. Yeah,
definitely. It's I don't know. Their marketing, I think, was masterful, and I think that as a result, there's a little bit of backlash of people who are like, this thing looked so great, and it doesn't do everything that I imagined. But it's also that's kind of the perennial Apple thing anyway, because it's the oh wow, like Apple has made something that's going to make my life better in amazing ways, and in most cases, it makes your life better a little bit. I definitely say there are things about my phone that make my life better, etc. But Apple is doing this for the long haul. They're not just saying, okay, here is the perfect watch, ta-da! And people who say, oh, well, it doesn't do this, doesn't do that. This is very much also a 1.0 type of thing. When people ask me that, like, you get the questions, hey, is that an Apple Watch? Or, is that an iWatch? Oh, yes, it's an iWatch. And the next question is, how do you like it? And what's great about it? And so, I have no problem saying, it's still a 1.1, 1.0, 1.1. It's something that Apple is putting into the ground as, okay, wearables are becoming a thing, and we need to be in this space, and we have the know-how and the resources and the enthusiasm to do something good in this space. It's, I'm sure Apple Watch as it is now is not, the best version that they can imagine, but you also have the realities of shipping schedules and manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. That it's a very long way of getting around to saying that this is something that I don't see Apple abandoning. I don't see them saying, oh well, that was kind of a neat try, and we're going to focus back on iPads and iPhones or whatever. Like Apple has invested too much to make this a sort of one-off experiment. Like the Apple Hi-Fi stereo, that was kind of a one-off experiment. It didn't sell very well. It probably did okay. I'm sure it probably earned its money back, but it wasn't great, and so they ditched it. This is Apple saying, we're going to be in this category and we're going to try to dominate this category. And so, this is where it begins. And that's part of the reason why, I and Adam and Tanya did the book in the first place, to say, okay, this is something that Apple's going to stick with, Apple's going to improve. And, I want to stick with it and, improve the book and have future versions that, go into all the other cool details and tips and tricks and all of that are coming, because, it's important and it's exciting and it's new. I hope some of that made sense, because
well, I think it makes perfect sense, and especially given that right now, as we record this, there's been an article, I believe, by MarketWatch saying that Apple Watch sales have dropped precipitously, and it's like, oh, poor Apple. Yeah, I mean, this is it's pure link bait, because there's no basis in fact. We were talking pre-show. I was just in Las Vegas over the July 4th weekend. I ended up, as one does, in 3 different Apple stores. As one does, yes. Yeah, and there's no shortage of people, oogling and oohing and eyeing over the watches and trying them on. And some are buying, some are saying, well, I need to think about it, and that's fine. But and I realize that Las Vegas may not be the best, most representative place for this kind of thing, but at the same time, I do think it shows that the people who could be in the casinos are instead looking at watches. Yeah. So
I would actually guess that Las Vegas is probably a good environment for that, because you'll have people that really are from all over. You have people from big cities and small cities. Like they're all coming to Vegas. They're probably already thinking, I'm going to spend some money. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will be going and buying a watch, unless they hit it big on the casino floor or whatever. But they're interested and maybe a lot of these people don't have an Apple store near them, so this is their opportunity to actually see it. And my suspicion is that there are a lot of people who are very interested in the Apple Watch. And I'm not saying this just because it would be great for, my book and the Apple Watch and all of that stuff. But I think there are a lot of people who are very interested in it and have no intention of buying this first version because they know that it's a first version. But they're looking into it. They want to know about it. They want to see how it feels. They want to see how it's constructed. They want to get that sense of, does this live up to the hype that I've heard about? Is it as cool as the commercial makes it look? And a lot of them might say, oh, it's nice. Or they might say, wow, this is amazing, and still not buy because they know there's going to be a second version. There's going to be a third version. It's going to be thinner. We all know it's going to be thinner. And that's when they will, commit to it and then build on it. And, I think Apple knows that too. And so it's, there's so much potential in it that I think, a lot of people, I almost sound like I'm agreeing with the article. I think a lot of people are not buying it right now, but they will buy it in the future. As it relates to the article, I think that the article, which said that there was like a 90% drop in sales. I wrote something briefly about this on my blog last week because, first of all, something that has such massive marketing and hype behind it, plus supply constraints. Yes, there's going to be a drop in sales because all the people who wanted it first got it. And then, like, those people have already bought it. So yes, there's going to be a drop in sales. But the more important thing is that Apple doesn't release these numbers. Apple, people who say that like the data that they're pulling these numbers from seems to be suspect at best. If Apple were to say Apple Watch sales were softer than we anticipated. Of course, they won't say that, but then I might put some weight to it. But I don't see any diminishment of interest. It's mostly just somebody knew that they could get a lot of traffic on the web by writing this story, and these come up on a regular basis. If it turns out that the Apple Watch is not very successful, I think it's still that Apple problem, which is, the Apple Watch, the iPhone sold 80 kabillion models and the Apple Watch only sold 4 kabillion, and every other company out there is like, oh God, I wish we could sell, like 10% of what Apple's probably sold the Apple Watch.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and I don't have it at my command right now, but the estimates from some of the same people that are talking about the 90% drop were that the Apple Watch has sold, that has sold more by a multiple, some incredible multiple than all of the other smartwatches combined.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, so I don't know that you can realistically expect every single product to be just this amazing wave of sales. Yeah. But it sure seemed like getting out of the gate, it looked good. And it's dropped off now. It's leveled off. But there's still a lot of interest. I think you're right. I think there are people that are going to hang out and wait for the next version, even though we're only a few months into this. Mm-hmm. There's so many different factors here. But I feel really good about the future of the Apple Watch. And maybe that's speaking just as an Apple Watch owner. That I figured out what it's good for in my life, and that's why you need Jeff's book to find out why it's going to be good in your life.
Yes, exactly.
How's that for a pitch, Jeff?
I love it. Yeah. I love that pitch. That's great. I agree wholeheartedly.
So let's go through the specifics of the book. If you bought the very first edition, I'm sure you've upgraded by now. But what is the current edition, and how much does it cost, and all that?
So the current edition, it's a 1.1 version. It costs $10. So only $10. It's about I want to say 70 pages. And if you've seen the crash course books and the layout, it's not like 70 pages of here's a paragraph and a whole bunch of pictures. Like this is, lots of dense information, lots of text. Lots of lots of information, lots of descriptive photos. So it has a lot there in terms of per page. As many tips and notes as I could cram in there. I was just trying to think of like for example, some things that I did not know. One thing that I use all the time, to just sort of as an example of a tip, when you put the watch back on after you've taken it off, it automatically locks when you take it off. When you put it back on, you have to enter a passcode in order to get it back on or to turn it back on. You don't actually have to do that. If you put your watch on and then unlock your iPhone, that will unlock the watch. And so every morning I put my watch on, and it'll sense the motion, and it'll say enter your passcode, and I just grab my iPhone 6 and I use Touch ID to open it, and then there's a setting in preferences, and I'm pretty sure that it's on by default, but if not, it just says if your phone's unlocked, then your watch is unlocked, and then after that, since it knows that it's on your wrist, it knows that it's safe and secure and doesn't need to be locked again. So like little things like that were a lot of fun to discover while playing with settings and things like that. Try to put as much of that as possible into the book, because those are the kind of things that that are fun to discover, and especially the Apple Watch being something that's noticeable. And have people ask you about it. Like, it's really great to find these things and say, oh, well, here, let me show you this thing that it can do, just for the demonstration value of it.
Okay, I clearly didn't read the book enough, because now I got to go back, because I did not see that. So that's a very cool tip. And we got to get you back and talk about this more, because we didn't even talk about Apple Pay. We didn't talk about Siri.
Right.
For a little device, there's a lot going on here on your wrist.
There is, which is so it's really surprising that people are like, oh, I can tell time already. It's like, oh, this does so much more than that, and yet you don't have to do everything that it does, or you find yourself doing things that you didn't anticipate, like you said, like using Siri, using Siri to do all sorts of things that you don't think of that as a feature, because that's just the way you do something. You know what I mean? Like it becomes natural very quickly. Yeah.
Jeff, come back and see us again, please.
Okay.
I know we have some other projects, but we'll definitely come back and do more Apple Watch stuff and all kinds of stuff, because there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yes. Great.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Folks, Apple Watch, a Take Control crash course. I got it right that time. TakeControlBooks.com. Mr. Jeff Carlson. He'll help you get the most out of it. He'll help you decide if you want it, and if once you do get it, what all you can and should be doing with it. I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. We'll be back again soon. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.